With us here today, we have Mr. Kunle Lawal, Executive Director of Electoral College. You're welcome, Mr. Kunle. Thank you very much for joining us on a Sunday morning right after the LGA elections from yesterday. So we're going to start with asking your evaluation of what you thought about the elections. You had the report there. There were cases of, well, accredited parties not being on the ballot. Only two parties in that Jeremy fellow ward there. Rather shocking. And then we've got cases of voter apathy, which was rather obvious. But what's your all about evaluation of the elections?
I'd like to quickly say at this point that I've always spoken about the centralization of local government elections, and here is why. Nigeria, I would say, or general states, and it's seen not only in Lagos State, the partisanship sentiment, because states control such elections. The partisan sentiment has seemed to have eroded local government elections. And in a state like Lagos, I'll give an example. Let's say Alimosho in FAC allocation receives 1.8 billion naira a month. And you can't play such narratives and hoard governance from the people. I always say local government elections, the first handshake to the people. So you can't hoard such democratic or civic rights from the people. Now, this continues. Lagos is massive. There were massive administrative faults. There were massive logistical problems. And what's most shocking is Lagos people, or Lagosians generally, do not even care about the ballots entirely. So here is a state that has about 10.7 million voters registered, that's with PVCs. Presidential, Lagos only accounts for 1.7 million voters. At gubernatorial, less than a million, a little less than a million. And at local government elections, Lagos State last recorded about 275,000 people participating in elections, which is critically about 3% of Lagos voting population. And I fear this election is far less. You cannot have a state that receives more than, let's say, more than 20 billion in FAC allocations to local governments, to 20 local governments. About 13 billion, I'm sorry, please, about 13 billion in FAC allocations to local governments. And it's this poor. LISEC, for me, generally, failed at entirely its operations, not only administratively, logistically, but LISEC has also proved not to be non-partisan. And I'm critically saying this because I do not understand how a lot of people were omitted from the ballot. A lot of parties were stripped from the ballot. That is an infringement on the rights constitutionally. That's an infringement on the Electoral Act. That's an infringement generally on democracy. For me, I cannot even understand how LISEC even claims to be an electoral commission right now. I cannot.
Kunle, thank you for that. You just give us a huge, very in-depth snapshot of what it was like yesterday. But we do have our correspondent, Victor Mbadike, who covered most of Lagos yesterday during the elections. He was at last year as well, and he joins us live. He also was at Surulere and parts of Mushin and Yaba as well. Victor, good morning to you. Victor, are you there? Seem to have lost him.
Good morning.
Oh, there he is.
Victor, good morning. You covered last year, you covered Surulere, Shomolu, and Mushin as well, and some parts of Yaba. And of course, there were reports of low turnout, and you did show that, especially in places of Mushin and Surulere as well. What's your assessment? Why is that so much low turnout that we saw yesterday? Speaking to the respondents, what did they have to say?
Actually, it is really sad because you understand and believe with me that this kind of elections really is regarded as the most important election as far as the chance of government is concerned. Considering the fact that these elections are something that, it's closer to the people. But sadly, we do not have that kind of turnout that as expected. Most polling units from Surulere down to Yaba and then to Butemeta, to Mushin, to Shumulu, I mean, the story is almost all the same. You get to find more football centers. I mean, they turn the streets into football. The irony of it all is that you have, these huge crowd of football players, interested in playing football, and then just a minute walk or less than a minute walk from that point, you find empty polling centers or polling units. And that's a contrast. I mean, I really can't understand why they are more interested in just having fun. Although we have to speak a few of them to ask questions. Basically, why are they, ignoring, why are they not voting, basically? And they kept saying that even if they have to vote, it may not be at the time that the voting process began, that they just want to play football, and after which they can consider coming out later to vote. I mean, you really can't talk them out of, what they were doing then going to vote. So it's that sad. And for the few people that I saw voted in, these places I mentioned earlier, were very old people, some of them, using walking stick to walk. And that's a huge contrast to what is expected. I mean, with all due respect, some of these guys who don't have much time to spend again as far as living is concerned. But the youths who are expected to vote for their own lives to better the lives of their communities in terms of grassroots development, healthcare, getting better healthcare, primary healthcare centers, schools and all that. They are not just interested in all of that. So I begin to wonder where the excuses begin to come again from tomorrow. And that's the sad reality. We had most of them old men coming out to vote, while the younger ones are just playing football and just catching their phone. Well, I do not have the kind of experience that the likes of my colleague FA had in Victoria and the rest of that. There were no issues of technical issues with the beavers and all of that. Everything was working perfectly. But we only had a challenge of people coming out to just exercise their franchise, which was the only challenge. We had no other challenge at all. But of course, in some centers, they boasted of, I think, about 50 or 50-something people coming to vote the whole day, out of almost 1,000 registered voters in those polling centers. That's too low.
Well, thank you very much, Victor. Victor, we might be coming back to you for more detail regarding your experience. But let's go back to Mr. Kunle Lawal. Mr. Kunle Lawal, from everything inside of the report, everything with which Victor has just told us, what do you think? Do you think that this is enough call for a cancellation?
I wouldn't say it's a call for a cancellation. Let's be honest, that a democracy evolves around the fact that as long as it was conducted, as long as there were less than, there wasn't massive issues of violence, it's the choice of the people. I'll give an example. Critically state, if out of a polling unit, which probably goes about, let's say, 1,000 or 1,500 people, if only 20 people came to vote, that's the choice, that's the civic right. It's also not voting is also constitutionally, I'll say, correct, because it's your choice to stand against the system. So if you choose not to vote, just understand that what will happen would be that your choice not to vote will be recorded as a choice. So those that chose to vote, which are 20, will decide who becomes local government chairman. Now, in Lagos, where you have LCDAs and etc., local government LCDA chairmen or councillors are decided with less than 1,000 votes, which is not supposed to be possible because of Lagos population. But you can't talk about cancellation because it's a choice people have made. It's a choice people have accepted. And it's democratically right if they choose not to or if they choose to stand down. So you can't accuse the cancellation. I clearly feel LASEC did quite a poor job in promotion of the elections, did a poor job in civic education, a dismal job in civic education for the Lagos State residents. And LASEC, for me, logistically, failed totally. I was watching News Central yesterday, and I noticed
Kunle, I'm going to take you back a bit. I'm sorry to stop you there, but I'm going to take you back a bit. Now, if you say that in a ward where you had where you have 1,500 people registered and only 20 people come to vote, and from the information that we got from yesterday, most of the people who came to vote were actually party stalwarts, party participants, let me put it that way, not necessarily people or residents of the areas. That seems a bit, I mean, it doesn't really make any sense to go ahead with such a performance. This is me just playing devil's advocate here and asking whether you truly believe that that is true democracy. If people choose not to vote, then that's their choice. And whatever votes we have in there, even if it's just 20, let's go ahead with it and install a chairman, a councillor, a vice chairman. That's rather unfair, wouldn't you say, to the entire democratic process?
There's a difference between the morality of it, which is what you're speaking of, and then the legitimacy of it. The choice of the people not to vote is constitutional given rights. So the party stalwarts came out, then that means party stalwarts thought it was more important. And it's really sad. It's really sad. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a legal state that has 10.7, a little over 10.7 million voters in Lagos, and has never in a presidential elections delivered up to 2 million votes. That is less than 20%. Lagos in its gubernatorial elections has never delivered 1 million votes. That means less than 1 million for gubernatorial. That is bad. Considering the 10.72 million voters in Lagos, it is bad. It is below par. And in local government elections, like I stated, last local government elections was 3% of Lagos voting population, which was 275,000. I feel this is far worse. Okay. I do not, for me, I think Lagosians have abandoned governance, have dictated that governance is totally restricted to a particular party, and have totally neglected and decided to accept anything that governance presents to them.
Let me jump on that, Kunle.
Where it's called a mega city.
Let me jump on that, Kunle. Now, if Lagos has absolutely abandoned governance, absolutely abandoned choice, isn't that indicative of a symptom that there's something wrong? And doesn't that make it seem like we have to go back and check exactly what the problem is? Perhaps they didn't have the opportunities to even have their PVCs in the first place. What's wrong with these wards? Have we checked it? Have we inquired? Have we investigated? It might not just be voter apathy, is what I'm saying. It could be something else. Then there is the fact that some of these wards didn't have representatives from the other parties on the ballot. What do these parties have to do now? What recourse do they take? Because they're duly registered, they're accredited, and then day of election, there's nothing. What happens? In time past, nothing ever happens. It's just business as usual. But what do you think should happen to the system, and what should these parties that weren't represented do?
Remember that I critically stated initially that Lagos has 10.7 to 10.7 million voters. That shows that Lagos is choosing not to vote. I mentioned the critical amount of voters. Now, as regards LISEC, I have beyond reasonable doubts that LISEC is playing a partisan game. Why would you put two parties on the ballot when there are more than 5 parties participating at different levels, as chairmanship levels, at local, at councillorship levels? You only decide to put 2 parties just to play like you are in partisan. And for me, LISEC has failed fully. I would not at any point state that LISEC even wants a democracy in Lagos State. For me, I find LISEC totally complicit in democracy. I'm surprised Lagosians wouldn't raise this up. I'm surprised Lagosians think too little of what their governance is. I'm surprised, as much as we can say some people have received PVCs and etc., I agree. But like I said, in a situation where you have 10.7 million voters, you can't blame 275,000 in local government elections and saying people's PVCs are, no, it's a little too much. And, even looking at your videos, you don't have massive videos from different locations. I'm seeing it. I've seen this girl's face multiple times. There was nothing to show for the local government elections. And that is an irresponsibility on behalf of LISEC, which I consider a total failure. And also the citizens of Lagos mortgaging their responsibilities in an election, being honest.
Okay. Well, Kunle, I want to say thank you very much as we wrap up this session here. Thank you for your expert opinion and also observation that was noted. We will continue to come to you for some of these details, especially as we await the results. But thank you very much for joining us now.